Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate being here today and sharing with you some stories and experiences and perhaps some insights of my experiences that have touched me or taught me something that I can now share with you today. Typically, I go into schools and speak to youth. However, it is a real honor and a pleasure to be here among fellow adults in a workplace environment to share something that typically might not be shared in a workplace environment. Today it's not about business strategies. It's not about money strategies. It's not about conflict resolution, although it could be indirectly. And in fact, it could affect all of these things even though it's something from a different angle. As you know, my name is Laura Louise Persichetti, and I am from Ontario, Canada. It is an honor for me to travel here and speak with you to share some of my stories from traveling and how my life experiences, my interactions with people, my personal journey has had such an impact on my development, consciousness, expansion, and today I get to share that with you. Many of you might know of a project that I'm working on. It's called the Good Deeds Project. This is also what I like to call the Good Deeds Movement. It was actually birthed as a suicide prevention program. And in my community of 75,000 people, we had a period of time where there was a lot of youth suicides. And it was at a time I was very involved in the community in a variety of different ways, and especially with youth. I was working at a children's mental health agency. I was also working through volunteer at the hospice, doing bereavement work in high schools and workshops. I was helping out with a distress line in Sarnia and also part of the suicide prevention committee. So my experience during that time had a huge impact by these youth suicides, and I had my own personal experience with suicide. I have lost an uncle when I was young and an aunt when I was older and very close to her. I also lost a good friend, and recently I lost someone very special to me, and all through suicide. And it's not something that I would wish to anyone to experience, and any opportunity I get to share a way for people to become aware and develop a mindfulness around it, I take, because it's not something I would wish upon anybody to have to have as one of their life experiences. So, in my journey and being someone who advocates for suicide prevention, you can imagine that not a lot of people want to talk about suicide. I would have talks and do different workshops. However, it's a topic that people shy away from, and it's a topic that, unless you've been directly affected by, not one you typically tend to think about. So even though I was trained in ASSIST and doing suicide prevention training for people working with youth in different workplace environments, different adults, parents, teachers, it was something that didn't really fulfill me in a way that I felt could make the greatest impact. So I started to think to myself, what is it that I really want to create? If it's not, like, what is suicide prevention? You know, if these people are coming from a space where whatever it is that they're dealing with is something so big that fogs them up completely, that they can't see a way out, what is the opposite of that, so to speak, that can really interrupt that thought pattern and really help people in that space? So this is where the Good Deeds Project was birthed. And when I speak about good deeds and I share good deeds, it creates this entirely good, feel-good experience, not just for myself, but for the people who I'm sharing it with. And to me, that was something I'd like to focus more on and still create the same impact and the same result as suicide prevention. So I have defined a good deed as something that is done with good intention, that is also received with appreciation. Sometimes we do things with good intention that may not necessarily be received with appreciation. I know with my work in international development, I do a lot of different trips and projects within Haiti specifically, but as well as places in Africa and South America. But Haiti just has this special place in my heart. And I have termed something I call the dry well. The dry well theory is that sometimes there are people that have this great idea and they go into a space and they implement that idea and they think that it's going to really help. They feel that it's something that's going to make a huge impact, and they implement it and then they leave. And the dry well theory is huge for this, because many people know that having access to water in a place like Haiti is something very important and something that can make a huge difference. So sometimes people raise all this money, go in, create this water well, and then leave. But then the well breaks down or something happens, and then it just becomes this cement platform that's dry, where people just kind of hang out and sit on. And it was done with something called good intention. However, when you go into a space and you really talk to the people and you really understand the community and the culture and the needs, and you work together in collaboration, you can develop an opportunity where everybody has a hand in it, and everyone has an opportunity to create what is needed, and then that dry well theory can become something that is done together within the community. And when something breaks down, those people have been taught and had the experience to learn what does it look like to put it together. And if it breaks, when those people leave who were there with such good intention, there's a way for it to continue to work. So this dry well theory isn't just something that happens in the developing world. I think it's something that happens in our workplace. I think it's something that happens in our homes, and I think it's something that happens in our relationships. We have a good intention to do something, however, it's not necessarily appreciated by the person we're doing it to, because it might not necessarily be what they feel is needed. It might not necessarily be the thing that they feel is most important at that time. So we can get some dry well situations in our relationships for sure, and definitely in our workplaces, if there's not clear communication, collaboration, and working together in a way to really hear from the grassroots up what is needed and how can we come together to implement these things. So a good deed is something that comes with good intention, but is also received with appreciation. It is also meeting a need in a moment that's not planned, and it's a moment where you just notice something that needs to happen and you show up. The reason this can be related to suicide prevention is simply because you never really know where someone is at mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically in their life. And that moment where you show up and offer a good deed, it could be the very thing that offers hope or that interrupts the thought pattern. It could be the very thing that shows that someone sees that person, or someone is here and someone cares. And especially if it's a pure stranger, that someone goes out of their way to meet another person's need just for the sake of it, or for whatever reason that drives that good deed. It can make a massive difference. In fact, when I was in high school, I was in grade 12. I was walking down the hallway with some friends, and I stopped to have just a little bit of a hello with this young grade 9. And honestly, I don't remember what I said. I don't really remember it being very long. It was just a quick kind of passing. And 4 years later, that young gentleman was in grade 12, graduating and going away to university. And he contacted me and asked if he could connect with me to give me something. I was like, okay, sure. And I had, got to know him a little bit over the years, and it wasn't weird for him to connect with me. However, I was kind of curious as to what it was he wanted to give me. So he gave me an update of how he graduated and how he was going away for school, and he gave me a letter, and he left. I opened the letter up, and he shared with me that the day I stopped to talk to him, he was emptying up his locker, and he was taking all his stuff home, and he had pills at home ready for him to overdose, and he was going to kill himself. And the fact that I stopped to talk to him and acknowledge his presence in his existence was the very thing that shifted him out of that mindset and made him make a different decision. I never thought twice about that conversation. I had no intentions of going out of my way to save someone's life, or that I even would have known that that was the ripple effect. And this experience allowed me to understand the ripple that I had, and sometimes we don't always get that gift to know the impact we have on other people when we just stop to talk, or when we stop to hold the door open, or we stop to help with something. We never know where people are at, and we never know how that little pebble of a good deed can create ripples that continue on in ways that sometimes we never see. In this case, I was blessed to know a little bit of that ripple, and I was able to really appreciate those moments in a really defining way. But we don't always get that, and I think it's not important to get that understanding every time. It's just important to know that when somebody around us is in need, to just show up, to be mindful and aware that we're on this path together, and we are able to show up for each other in that way. So, holding the door for somebody behind you could be that thing. Because just think, if you're having a bad day and everything is going wrong, and you have all these papers and you drop all these papers, you could be like, oh, of course I dropped all this because everything else is going wrong in my life. And you could be in that space where you're just in that frequency where everything is going wrong, everything is not good, and everything is just a struggle. And that one little incident might not be the incident that is the biggest problem, but it could be the thing that overflows. And when someone stops, let's say to help pick up those papers, it could help interrupt that frequency. It can help shift that person's mindset and let them know, oh, wow, someone cared enough to stop and help me. Someone cared enough to see that I needed something and is here to support me. So good deeds have an impact in that way, and it's also something that everybody understands and gets. When I talk about good deeds with kids, 3 years old, they get it. Just the same as when I talk to, a 73-year-old about good deeds. Everybody gets it. Everybody gets kindness. Everybody understands that. But we don't necessarily talk about it, teach it, or bring it to our awareness in a way that recognizes the impact that kindness has on each other, and the impact that has on the people in our lives, whether we know them or not, whether they're strangers, coworkers, family members, friends, acquaintances. So a good deed is something that many people do naturally. I have found that a lot of people have shared, oh, this good deeds project you're doing, like, we shouldn't talk about good deeds. It's just something you should do. Yeah, and you know what? Unfortunately, that's not something that just people do. And if you are one of those people who is a natural good deeder that goes out and above and beyond to support people around you, I just want to acknowledge that. I just want to honor that and let you know that it makes a big difference. And you might never know the difference that it makes, and it doesn't matter. But I just want to acknowledge and honor and thank you for being one of those people out there, because you're setting an example of someone who shows a genuine care, an acknowledgement, love, compassion for people around you, and I thank you. So the Good Deeds Project as a movement is really about creating a culture of mindfulness, a culture of collaborative problem solving, a culture of understanding we're all on the same team. We're all human beings having this experience on earth, and we're all have the same needs and desires, maybe in its own different expression. However, we're all working in the same space, going in the same direction, even though sometimes we feel like it's an entirely different direction from the person next to us. We're on the same team. There are people walking this path around us, and sometimes we get into a space where we're going through life like this, and we only see the things that are in front of us. We only see the problems that we're stumbling on, or the relationships that we're struggling with, or the piles at work that are overwhelming. And we just get stuck in this space, this tunnel vision, and we forget that there's people around us walking this path with us. There's people around us that need us, and there's people around us that we also need. And when we can start to develop this awareness, this mindfulness, understanding that, hey, there's others walking this path too, and we're all on the same team, then we can create an entirely different culture. So as you can imagine, bringing this into schools is about creating that culture into schools. However, bringing that culture in the workplace can make a huge difference. And today I'm excited to share that with you, and understanding that noticing when your coworker is having a bad day, it's a really simple thing that you can do to support them. It doesn't mean you have to talk it out and, become a counselor to all of your coworkers, although some people might do that. It's something of just the simple things, asking someone if they want a tea or coffee when you're going to the kitchen for a break, or writing a little note on someone's desk just to show that you appreciate them. These little things, they make massive differences in the workplace. Because what happens in the workplace is that there's so much to do, and there's so many tasks to get done, and we can get so task-oriented in such a space that gotta do this, 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 gotta do this. Not to mention, we have our family life on the outside, we have our relationships on the outside, we have, all of our bills and things we're working towards outside of work, and then we go into work and there's this whole other pile of stuff to conquer and get done. So when people in your workplace can be on your team, that doesn't make a difference. And it's so important to understand that we are on the same team, and we should all start to think about what that can look like for ourselves as an individual. So with the Good Deeds Project, I was working at a children's mental health agency, and it started one day. I went for a morning meditation walk, and I live near a beach, so I was walking along the beach. It's November, I'm bundled up. I had long johns and thick pants and snow pants, and I have like a long sleeve thermos shirt and sweater and hats and mitts and big jacket. I'm totally bundled. And I'm standing at the water's edge, and I'm just looking at it, and I get this thought, you should go in. And then a quick thought, are you crazy? And then all of a sudden I'm in this internal dialogue of like, okay, I just acknowledge this draw to go in for some reason, yet as much as I'm arguing it, I know it's going to happen, and for some reason I'm feeling compelled that it's a need to happen too. So I end up, it's like 4:30 in the morning, the sun is like still, it's still dark. I end up stripping down and going in for a polar dip, running in, jumping under, swimming for one stroke, and jumping up and screaming at the top of my lungs, and I just start laughing, and I'm like freezing. I run out, I get my clothes back on, I put them all on, and I'm laughing hysterically the whole time, freezing. I'm talking freezing. I live in Canada, remember, so it is cold in November. I put on my coat, my everything else, and I walk back to my house, and I honestly giggling the whole time. I go, of course, have a hot shower, and I drive into work that morning, and something was different. Not entirely sure what shifted, but something definitely shifted. And I like to go into work early, and it's really quiet, and I tend to kind of ease into the workspace and get a lot of stuff done before the action starts to happen. And I'm sitting at my desk, I turn on my computer takes forever to load. I don't know if you guys have this issue. And I'm just waiting, I'm looking around my office, and I have this bulletin board. And there's pictures all around the border of me with kids in different places in the world that I have worked with. There's a couple of kids with me in Peru and Africa, Bolivia, and this one special child that I really have a heart connection to and a life experience I'll never forget in Haiti. And I'm looking at these pictures, and then I turn and look, and I have this canvas that I created with all these inspiring people, like Mother Teresa and Gandhi and Martin Luther King and all these great people, and it says, "Be the peace." And I'm looking at these things, and all of a sudden I just realized I need to do something else. I need to do something bigger. All these youth suicides were getting to me, and I feel like I was doing all of these things to help make a difference, and I'm sure I made a difference. I'm not trying to downplay what I was doing. However, I just had this desire, this drive, this experience, like there was something more that I needed to create. And all of a sudden it felt like I was a lion in a cage. And that day I had so much struggle sitting at my computer doing work, and I was pacing and going for walks, and I just was in this space of knowing that something needed to shift. And of course I had a friend call, timely enough, from out west, telling me, "Hey, you know what, you should move out west." And I'm like, you're calling me at a time where I feel pretty vulnerable to this conversation, because I was just thinking today that I really need to do something different. And then this is kind of how the thought process started with the Good Deeds Project. Because I was like, well, if I was going out west, then how would I get there? And what would I do? And I decided, well, if I'm going to go out west, then I'm going to do good deeds all along the way. And I made this decision and had no idea how it was going to unfold into this incredible movement and this incredible life-changing and experiential learning for me called the Good Deeds Project. So I sit with this for a few weeks, and that feeling doesn't go away. I just have this stir, like I need to do something, and I decide I'm going to quit my job. And first, of course, I started by requesting a leave of absence, and they had shared that I couldn't do that. So then I resigned, and it was actually quite a blessing, because the union found out that I resigned and shared, well, we're in a deficit right now, and there's no reason they should have denied your leave of absence when we were actually exploring looking for voluntary layoffs. So I took a voluntary layoff, and I went out and started traveling. I started traveling East Coast Canada, and I went to the East Coast US, doing good deeds and finding people who were doing good deeds, filming it, and starting to create a documentary called the Good Deeds Project. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I was coming across people who were doing such incredible things in the world. People who were just regular people who realized, oh, you know what, there is a need, and they had an idea of how to solve a problem or how to meet that need, and they started implementing some things and gathering some people together and creating a project or an organization or whatever it was that was their baby, so to speak. And they might have had an obstacle here or a problem here or some hoops to jump through, but they made it happen, and at the end of it, I got to film what it was they created. And a perfect example is this elderly lady that I filmed in her 70s. And when she, 30 plus years previous, she recognized that there was a lot of people in her community, this was St. John in East Coast Canada, that were homeless or in need of food. So she started serving soup and bread out of her home, and had some friends who came and helped her with that. And eventually it started to get bigger and bigger, so they created a space elsewhere where they could serve more soup. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they had to find another space. And it just became this thing that just constantly grew, as well as had these incredible, miraculous experiences to support it all along the way as well. And this lady's story is so incredible. She just had so much inspiration and so much life experience and faith that her desire to help somebody, her consistent good deed offering that she created really changed lives and became a community thing. And the whole community consistently came together to support this project that she was working on. And one day she didn't have enough food to create a soup, and she just said, okay, well, we'll just start. And they cut up the vegetables that they did have. And over the course of the morning of preparing, somebody came with more vegetables, somebody came with different things to add, and all of a sudden they had this huge pot of soup out of nowhere, unplanned. Just the same as one day her fridge broke, and she thought to herself, oh my goodness, we're going to need a fridge, how are we going to do this? And then, in that same day, got a call with a fridge donation. And it was consistently like this. Whenever there was something needed at the shelter, it was provided for. And her stories were endless, and I filmed all of these things, and by the end of this interview, I'm just tearing up and crying, and she just touched me in so many ways. But I feel like every interview that I captured was just like this. It just touched me, and I just, in just so much emotion of these people who had these ideas and this desire to do something and selflessly offered a good deed in their way that made a massive difference. So I captured all these stories, and I went home to create, some mini episodes to put these stories together and, share them with people, because I felt this inspired me so much. Like this has to be shared with the world in some way. And when I went back home, there was a lot of obstacles. I went back home and realized that the camera equipment I was using was too advanced for my computer. So I had to upgrade my computer and my editing software and all these things, and cha-ching. And I realized that in my travels, I had completely used my savings in order to support the Good Deeds Project, to support these good deeds I was doing, to support the travels. And I thought to myself, okay, like me working and then using my money towards this Good Deeds Project was not going to be the most efficient way to get this project done. And I was just thinking and meditating and focusing on how can I create this project to be self-sustaining? How can I make it so that the Good Deeds Project is almost an entity on its own that holds itself up? And there was a lot of people that were offering good deed contributions that made a huge difference, but I just felt like I couldn't rely on that. I worked with so many NGOs and so many organizations where we're constantly worried and focused on getting donors and government grants and all these things. And I just thought, I don't want to deal with that hustle. Like, how can this project become a project of its own and still have the same result? And there's a couple things that came into the picture, and a friend of mine who sells tea and coffee was like, I really think this tea and coffee might be something that can help you. So I started to explore that and realize, oh wow, like one of the major good deeds I hear about all the time is how people buy the coffee for the person behind them in line, or how people will go buy coffees or teas and bring them to people as a good deed. And I just thought, oh, well, tea and coffee goes right hand in hand with good deeds. And I started connecting with people and sharing this tea and coffee and having these good deed experiences that just, it was one thing after another. In addition to all this, I was in a space where I was working on the stuff that was not necessarily my greatest strengths. Going and traveling and meeting people, filming these stories and getting all this inspiration, all this juice. Like, my real passion was in that, and I was so excited to do that. I was so pumped up. And then I was home, realizing I was broke, realized I didn't have the equipment that I needed, and realizing that all of a sudden, like, I was in this space, I felt like I was going backwards, and it was just like this wah, wah, wah kind of moment. And then at a time where I was really concerned about what I was going to do financially, my work called me back up, and there was a position that opened up. So then I returned back to work, and my financial situation eased a little bit. However, I felt like I was going backwards. I'm in the same office, and I have the same pictures in a pile now on my desk that I'm considering, do I put those back up? I'm sitting in the same chair, and I'm doing similar work. I'm just thinking, is this even progress? And I started to feel like really down on the project and on my mission and the juice that came from the traveling and the connecting and filming. I just loved it so much, and now all of a sudden I'm in this workplace again, in these walls, at a computer, doing reports, complaining because I don't have my favorite pen. I just thought, oh my goodness, what is this? What's going on here? And it took me some time to really become at peace with where I was, and to really see all the lessons in it, and to recognize that the good deeds never stop. It's not about going out and doing these big things and raising money and building a school in Africa. It's not about changing lives in like ridiculously huge ways and finding the cure of all these diseases and all this stuff. Sure, there are people that do that, and it's amazing, of course, but not all of us are called to do that. In fact, some of us can have the opportunity to make the greatest difference simply within our hula hoop. The people under our own roof, the people in our own workplace, the people we see on a daily basis, maybe at our favorite coffee shop or favorite restaurant. We have this opportunity to make a massive difference with our children, with our spouses, with our acquaintances. And sometimes when we're in that routine, we forget that. We forget that showing up and being present, being mindful and aware of the people in our circle is what really makes a huge difference. And in fact, if each of us had made that decision and decided that I'm going to take care of my hula hoop, I'm going to practice kindness, unconditional love, compassion, patience, and just work on this space right now. If we all did that, we really would, I would create this space, and you would create that space, and you would create this space, and you that space, and wow, what a big difference that can make just simply in this room. And then what a big difference that can make in the culture of this workplace. What a big difference that can make in the culture of our homes, in the culture of our communities. When we start to walk in the world, recognizing that we're all on the same team, and when somebody next to me needs something, that I can be there to support them. And I don't need to go journey across the country to do that. I don't need to travel across the globe to do that. I can, and that's cool, and I will, and you can, and you know, if you choose to, you can, you will. However, what about right now? What about this moment? What about the people we care about most? What about those people in our lives who are the greatest button pushers that really get to us? What if we could show up with patience, compassion, love, and awareness with those people, the ones that we want to just, take and strangle sometimes? And I'm sure not in this workplace that we have these button pushers, but many workplaces have at least one or two. Many families have at least one or two. I know I do. The power of good deeds on a daily basis in your daily practice can make a huge difference. And it just starts with a decision to decide to show up in that way. And what does that look like for you? Because what that looks like for me might be different, and that's okay. It's okay. But what does that look like in my life, in your life, to show up with mindfulness, with awareness, with kindness, with patience, with love, generosity, to be genuine, to be giving? What does it look like to receive that when somebody offers kindness or love, rather than think, oh, what does he want or what does she want? Oh, it must be up to something. What does it look like to actually just receive it without suspicion or resentment? When I came back from my travels, I was doing a lot of house sitting, and in between house sitting, I would be at my parents' place. And one of my greatest button pushers, I don't know about you, but it happens to be my dad. And I love him dearly. I say this with great love and great respect. But he's definitely one of my button pushers, because our greatest button pushers are actually our greatest teachers. And I definitely feel my father is one of my greatest teachers. But there was a period where he really closed me off, and just out of nowhere. And I really struggled with this. And I was like, what happened? If you got into a fight, then it's like, oh, it's because we got into a fight. But to just be cut off and not really understand why, and to try to interact and not get anything back, or to ask response, it was really interesting for me to be in that. And I let myself be in it for a couple weeks before it really started to get to me, and I thought, okay, he must be going through something. He must be in something, because I know on my end, nothing happened. I know for me, I still love him. He's still the same person. I don't feel angry, other than the fact that I'm confused as to why are you showing up in this way for me. So after kind of going through the roller coaster of it all, and the emotions, and the little girl in me wanting to, Dad, what's up? I want your love. And the teenager in me, coming out wanted to be like, go screw yourself. Why the hell are you treating me like this? And the adult in me is like, okay, I just want to pretend it's not happening. And then I tune into like my divine self, and it's just like, just be patient. Just continue to show up with love. They'll come around. So patience is not necessarily my greatest strength. However, good deeds are. So I decided one morning after going through this kind of passive silence and unknowing grudge, I decided that I was going to wake up and do a good deed. So typically my dad wakes up and he makes the coffee for him and my mom, and he was drinking hot water with lemon. So I woke up, made the coffee, cut up the lemon, boiled the hot water, got it all ready, made sure to put in a mug with a nice big happy face, and then I left. Later that afternoon, my mom messaged me texted me and said, hey, didn't realize you were the one that made coffee, thank you. Oh yeah, no problem. And then my dad texted me. First time in weeks after I've texted him or reached out, it was the first time he acknowledged my existence weirdly and says, thank you. I didn't realize you're the one that made the tea and coffee. Yep, no problem. Left alone. Next morning I did the same thing. And he messaged me again and he said, thanks for the tea and coffee again, or the tea again. And I was like, oh, no problem. And I left it alone. And then that day I went home for dinner and my brother was there and my parents. And it was the first time in weeks that my dad was acting normal again, out of nowhere. And then of course I flipped through to the other side thinking, wait a second, I do a couple of good deeds and all of a sudden you're going to be normal with me? That's not okay either. And I just, have to go through the whole emotions of that and experience that. And, come back to a place of peace and groundedness around it again. And a couple of days later, he comes out of nowhere at my work, shows up, and I open the door, and he just hugs me. And he says, I'm so sorry. I realized that, I was going through all this stuff, feeling like, I don't understand, you're always doing this traveling and doing all these things, you don't really help out, and I don't really understand your choices, and all this stuff came up. And really what it was, this belief system he had, this image he had for me at my age, I wasn't fitting in that box that he had created. And because I was in this other, shape, maybe more like a triangle than a square, he was trying to fit this square in the triangle. It wasn't happening, and he got this internal struggle out of nowhere. For me anyway, it seemed like out of nowhere. And we just had this incredible heart-centered connection and conversation around it all, and this deep, deep understanding and love in a way that I've never ever experienced with my dad, because remember, he's my button pusher. So this conversation and this opportunity to talk all this out in a heart-centered space made a huge difference. And it started with the Good Deed coffee and the Good Deed hot water with lemon. It opened up this door. However, I could have easily went the other way, where I showed up angry or resentful, or if you're going to treat me like this, then I'm going to treat you like that. And I could have showed up like that. And I decided, and it was a decision, I decided I did not want to show up like that. That even though it was hard, and even though I didn't understand, I was still going to show up with love and patience, in hopes that something was going to shake from that. And it did. And now my relationship with my dad shifted in such a way that I could never have planned. But this is just in my hula hoop. Showing up with a good deed, showing up from a place of love, showing up from a place of patience made a huge difference in one of the most important relationships in my life. One that for 28 years, we kind of had these dances every once in a while, or these struggles every once in a while. And now it just shifted in a way that I could not have ever imagined. It started with a good deed. So would that have happened if I was, traveling in Africa doing these things? Maybe not. Would my importance of whatever I was doing in Africa be significant as well? Of course. But what I'm trying to say now is we can decide now, today, to show up as a good deeder. Now, today, we can show up What would that look like in this workplace if we actually came from a place of kindness? What would that look like in this workplace if we actually came from a place of being on the same team? What would it look like if I realized a coworker was having a bad day? I didn't need to know what the bad day was about, but maybe I could just do something to shift it a little bit for them. What would that look like? What would it look like if I went into my relationships or into my home instead of expecting everybody to meet my needs, and I thought, you know what are your needs, and how can I, help? How can I offer something? Because the real power of a good deed, I'm going to tell you the biggest secret of all, is the joy of giving. Honest to God, when you give something to someone and realize how appreciated it is, and realize what a difference it makes, there really is no giving. Everybody receives. It's like this circle that has no end. You give and receive all in one experience. And that's a beautiful culture to create. It is a beautiful place to be in the relationships. It is a beautiful place to be with your coworkers, with your family members, with your partners, with your kids. Imagine what it looks like if that's how we showed up in the world and demonstrated that example for the children in our world. Because you know what? People are talking about bullying for these kids in the schoolyards, but I work in schools, and I see that same bullying has happened amongst the teachers, the parents, the staff, and I think if we can't figure this out as adults, how the hell are we going to figure it out to teach our kids? We have to choose to set the example. We have to set the example in our relationships. No matter what experiences we've had, no matter how our parents showed up, no matter how our life experiences presented themselves in the past does not create the future unless we allow the pattern to continue. We can choose now to interrupt that and create something new. Because you know what? We are evolved enough, we are educated enough, we are present enough in the world of information to be able to have the tools that we need in order to make change in this world. Be the peace you want to see in the world. Be the love you want to create in the world. What does that look like for you? Like, what does that look like? What is that? Because I don't have all the answers for you. I'm just presenting you some suggestions, some personal experiences of how this has changed me and how this has made an impact on my career, on my personal relationships, with my partnership with the person I love, and how I get to show up as an example for the people behind me, for my younger cousins, my nephew, my kids. I get to show up in that way and demonstrate that, hey, you know what? It might have been going like this for, generation after generation, but today, right now, I'm going to decide to change that. So let me explain something. It all starts with a decision. Energy follows thought. What you think, you create. What you speak, you create. Our thoughts have an energy. Our words have an energy. What we focus on is what is generated. So I am a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher. I do a lot of workshops on mindfulness meditation. That's my thing. And a lot of people will say, you know what, like, I don't know how to meditate. I know all of the benefits it has. It could de-stress, and it has all these amazing things, and I read all this stuff, but like I sit down and my head is crazy. I can't stop these thoughts. I can't meditate. I start thinking about, did I shut off the stove, or did I need to iron, or I need to call this person, or did I buy that at the store, or what am I going to do tomorrow at work, blah, 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 blah. And people share that with me as if it's like they're the only one that happens that to. Just to let you know, I'd just like to normalize the craziness of our mind and how busy it really is, especially in the culture that we're raised in. We are so influenced by things all the time. From when we were very young, influence is influence is influence. Not just our parents and family and friends, but everything coming in. You need this product to be beautiful. You need this piece of clothing to be skinny. You need this hair product to look gorgeous. You need this skin product to look young, and blah, 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 blah. You need something outside of you in order to be better. which means, guess what? We're not good enough. And we're programmed in this way, and then we show up in that way, and it's just a cycle that we really, as a culture, as a society, need to learn to interrupt. So we need to learn to interrupt that as an individual. And when we focus our thoughts on something, we create that. And once we have that understanding, we can start to understand that we're really designing what's happening around us. So making a decision to show up as a good deeder, so to speak, maybe a decision to show up with love, to show up with gratitude, to show up with compassion, we think that, therefore we focus on that, and we speak in that way. Guess what? We show up very differently. Here's the hint. If you can worry, you can meditate. Because worry is something that you're focusing on over and over and over and over again that creates a sense of anxiety or a sense of fear. So we're focusing on these things that worry us or make us feel we're not good enough or make us feel, anxious, upset, frustrated, angry, whatever it is. We're focusing, and we're on this wheel, and we create this thought pattern, these words, and essentially this energy, and this energy comes through us, and we show up in that way, and then we create actions from that space, which essentially creates results in our life. But then we look at the results and think, oh, it's because of the results. So let me break this down a little bit. So we're sitting here in this room. Everybody that you work with is here in this space. And I'm sure, there's lots of different personalities, lots of different experiences that people have. And somebody, doesn't have to be anybody specifically, but somebody might feel really anxious about that. Maybe they're really nervous to be around people. Maybe there's someone who, does really well in a space where they're isolated and quiet, and they just, do paperwork, and they excel in that space. And then to be in a space of lots of people and to socialize, to talk, to communicate, it's not their greatest strength, and it builds a little bit of worry. So let's say we have that person here. And that person is thinking in their head, oh my God, we're going to go to this workshop, and I'm going to be around everybody, and I have so much things to do, and I'm really nervous, and they're thinking this, and they're focused on that. And this is their thought pattern. Well, then that way of thinking creates the physical experience. But maybe they're, physically a little bit like closed off, or a little bit timid, so to speak, and they show up in that way, and that energy gets brought out. And then they show up in the room a little bit different. Maybe they stay to themselves and they're quiet, they're nervous, and they just kind of like write notes and don't really talk to anybody. And they have this result where they went into the room with all their coworkers and they didn't even talk to anybody, and they go home at the end of the day and they think, I wonder if I didn't talk to that person, and they kind of looked at me, maybe they don't like me, and it just creates this wheel. And we think, I go into high schools and I talk like this, and it's like, we never really grow out of that, apparently. We can get in this focus, this energy, where we, whatever that thought pattern is, I'm trying to just spitting out some examples, but it could be anything, right? Just the same, let's flip it. Maybe someone doesn't excel in the isolating in the office space or the report writing, and they're like, oh, thank God we have a day where we're doing a workshop, and we're going to be just hanging out with everybody, and there's going to be food and some coffee, and I don't have to sit at my desk, this is going to be great. Well, then their thought pattern is a little bit more open, and they're a little bit more interested and excited, and so they're thinking like that. Well, then what happens? Their whole body might be a little more relaxed. Their whole physical body might show up in a way that's like open, maybe a little bit more confident. Well, then what happens when they show up in this space? Well, they show up being in that space. Maybe they talk more to people, and they get to know their coworkers in a different way, and they understand some cool things that they wouldn't have learned about or understood if they didn't talk to their coworkers and understand, oh wow, they're really going through this thing, or I didn't know that about you, or whatever it is that comes through conversation. And it creates this result where maybe there's more of a connection with coworkers. Maybe there's a little bit more of a friendship that's built. It's a very different result. And there's no right or wrong. I just want to clarify, there is no right or wrong. You just get to decide what kind of result that you want, and understand that it actually starts from your decision, your thought patterns. If you have the first option, and then you have the result of, oh, I didn't really talk to anybody today, maybe you decide, the people at work are boring. Maybe you decide, the people at work don't like me. Maybe you decide because of the result that you hate workshops, or that you got nothing done, or whatever it is, you make a decision. Well, then you create a belief, which essentially puts you back in that thought pattern to show up in that way again next time. Somebody on the flip side might have a result where they really connected with coworkers and they really developed a new friendship, and then they decided that the people they work with really have something to offer. And they decided, wow, I really like getting to know my coworkers. And they decided, you know what, I enjoyed eating lunch with coworkers, and maybe once a week I'm going to, eat lunch with a different coworker just to get to know them. Well, then they decide that, they create a new belief system that the people that they work with are interesting, or the people that they work with have something to offer, or the people that they work with are someone that they really want to get to know. And they make a decision, which creates a belief system, which then generates the same thought pattern to create in that way. And it all starts with what? It starts with the thought, the words, the way of being, the way of showing up, the actions, and then the results, which essentially creates a decision, a belief system from the experience, and then back again. And this is life, by the way. This isn't just the workplace. This isn't just this work experience. This is, from every moment you had in life, where you had an experience, you decided something, which created a belief system, which created a lens where you showed up in the world from that thought pattern and those words and that energy, that physical body, and boom. So for example, let's say I go into a relationship and I feel, so open and excited and in love, and I show up completely honest and my whole self, and the person breaks up with me. And all of a sudden relationships are painful, relationships hurt, relationships equal bad. Well, then what happens? The next time I go into a relationship, I have that lens, that thought pattern, and look at how I even went, my physical body, right? So now it's in my body. So my whole physical body is showing up in that way, and I'm closed. And it starts with the belief system of relationships are bad, which creates thinking he's going to hurt me, or she's going to break up with me, or she's going to create pain in some way, which then I show up in a different way in the relationship, which creates a result of, oh, no one out there is, everybody out there is out to get me, or whatever it is, the result that happens. It's just the same. Let's say you're driving in your car, and you get to a green light, and you go through the intersection, and someone runs the red and smokes your car. Well, guess what? When you get back in that car, you might not even want to get back in the car, because car equals danger. So you might ride the bus for a little bit, or maybe you walk, until one day you decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to get back in my car. And then you get back in the car, and your whole physical body is like, ugh, every time you go through an intersection, it's like, ugh, like, you don't even think about it anymore. It's in the body. Your body has this experience where it tightens, and you're like, ugh. And then you think, you're tense and in the car. Unless you become aware of this. Unless you become aware that it was just one car accident, it was just one relationship, it was just one workshop. It doesn't have to equal every single one from there. Deciding to show up as a good deeder, deciding today to show up. What does it look like if we created a collective culture of kindness in the workplace? What does it look like if we create a culture where we're working together on the same team? What does it look like if we show up from a place of love in the workplace? Nobody teaches that in the workplace. Love, what? Guess what? We don't even really have examples of love anywhere other than, movies. What does it look like when we get to become that example of what we desire love to look like, kindness to look like, human beings to look like? What does it look like if we decide to just be a little bit more open, a little bit more mindful, a little bit more aware of the world happening around us? What does that look like? Because you know what? I want to know. I want to live in a world where I get to see that, where I get to raise my kids in that kind of culture. I want to see that. I want to see world peace. Because, wow, we've gone way too many generations where we just don't get to see that. And you think that world peace comes from our government? It should be happening in these developing countries? We think that world peace, means put the guns away? No, world peace means put the dukes down in your own hula hoop and show up from a place of love. Show up from a place of patience. Show up from a place of compassion. Practice it here. Practice it with the people you love most. My God, we treat the people we love most the worst. Why? Because we think they're never going to go anywhere? Guess what? They do. They do. People are not here around you forever. And don't let an experience where somebody dies before you get that. Don't wait until a time where a terminal illness is diagnosed or someone takes a life before you get that life is short. People are important, and you can make a difference to those people just by showing up, being present. It's not complicated. I really promise you to demonstrate love. Love is presence. Be present. When you're walking down the hall and you see a coworker and you say, "Hey, how are you?" Listen to the answer rather than just, keep going. When you're walking down the street and there's another human being walking by you, look at them, smile, try it on. Try on a smile for a day. Make it a point, just for one day, that you're going to smile at everybody that you encounter. And maybe they're not going to smile back, and that's okay. Don't get attached to what they do. Just decide how you're going to show up. Make it a point to hold the door open for the person behind you every time you go through a door. In fact, even if the person is way behind you, hold the door and just enjoy the silliness of how surprised they are that you've waited that long for them to come through the door. And just kind of laugh to yourself and enjoy it. Make it a point where you actually sit with the people that you love most and ask them, how are they? And be okay with what the answer is. Because you know what? It's okay if people are not always happy and everything is always great. It's okay to be in the dirt and struggling. Be comfortable in your own struggle so that you can be comfortable with the struggle that other people are having, and you could just be present. Because you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to fix it or problem solve for everybody. So lay off yourself. Chill out. Just be present. Listen. Just have joy in being with the people in your life. Because you know what? We get so caught up in the workplace. Do. Go. Get this done, get that done, get that done. And we work so hard for the things we want most, which is spend time with our family. We work so hard to live in a house that we barely spend time in. We work so hard to put food on the table for the kids that we don't even really sit down and talk to. Lay off yourself. Chill out. Enjoy being present. Enjoy the people in your world. Enjoy your family, your friends, your coworkers, because you know what? I guarantee in this room there are some pretty cool people. Everybody's got a story to tell. Everybody's got some life experiences. And even that button pusher that maybe yesterday you could have punched in the face, they're likely struggling with something. They're likely hurting somewhere. So maybe they're not the person you go to for support. Maybe they're not the person you go to vent to, but maybe you can be their person one day. Maybe. I'm just, it's a suggestion. You don't have to do anything. I'm not here, I'm not going to follow you around and make sure you become a good deeder. That's not my job. I'm just offering some suggestions. But like, what would that look like? I'd like to see what it looks like if we all create our own ripple. Watch the kindness flow out. Create our own ripple. Watch the love flow out. I'd like to see that. And you know what drives me to share this message? Is I've watched way too many young people die of suicide when they don't even realize how much there is in life, that they didn't even get to see the other side because they got so fogged thinking that this is it. This problem here is it. They focused so much on that problem or whatever it was, and the only way out for them was to cash out. And let me tell you, you do not want to find someone you love dying that way. You don't want to have that experience in your back pocket. So today, in this moment, you can decide to change things. And it might not be so easy right away because you've lived a life of doing things a certain way, creating certain patterns, creating certain neural pathways in the brain. And those neural pathways is where you go, especially when you're stressed or challenged or struggling. You jump on that neural pathway of however it was that you reacted or whatever pattern you created over time. So have some compassion and patience for yourself to change that. If you were to create a new neural pathway of love or a new neural pathway of kindness, it might take some time. It's like if I were to create a highway from here to the next city, and it's never been created before. I might have a machete and cut through a little bit, and then I might put down some sand or stones or clay or something and walk, get a little path going. And then the next time I might, lay down some cement, make a sidewalk, and then maybe if I keep going, I'm going to make it into a road, and then eventually I'm going to make it into a highway, and that's just where I'm going to go. This is what it works like in our mindfulness, in our head, in our brain, in our neurological experience. It takes time to create that pathway of mindfulness, of love, of kindness, interrupting those patterns, those experiences where we've decided that the world is bad, and we've decided to be fearful of the people around us, or we decided that relationships suck, or we decided that our work sucks, or we decided that, I'll never have a relationship with my dad, or decided that the life is horrible, or whatever it is. Make a decision today to change that. Unless you feel good, if you feel good with where you're coming from, you don't have to do nothing. Just trying to share some tips on how to create a little bit of joy and happiness, and how you really feel. Good deeds feel good. Giving and receiving feels good. Coming from a place of kindness. God, just try it on for a day. It feels so good. And you know what? You might only have one experience where someone showed up for you and met your need in that moment. And God, did you ever appreciate it? Tap into that. Tap into that memory. And remember that. Focus on that. Yeah, of course, there's going to be times where someone didn't show up for you and how terrible that felt and it sucked. But if you focus on that, it's not going to feel so good. Focus on that. That's where your thoughts are. That's where your emotions are going to. I focus on all the times my relationships fell apart. I'm going to, create a feeling of anxiety or a feeling of fear in relationships. And then I'm going to show up entirely different. But if I focus on the possibility that I can recreate something, that I can shift, that I can show up in a different way in my relationships, and how if I focus on gratitude power of gratitude is so powerful. It's amazing. Amazing. Start there. Start with gratitude. So good. And not just, oh, I'm thankful for the trees, I'm thankful for my mom, I'm thankful for water. But why? Think about why and let that feeling come through your body, because our experiences, our thoughts, our belief systems, everything's in the body. The body talks to us. And gratitude, allow your whole body to feel it. Think, oh, I'm so grateful for the trees, because without the trees, I wouldn't even be able to breathe. Without breathing, I wouldn't even be alive. I'm thankful for my mom, because like who would I talk to at the end of the day? Like, or who would I share all these experiences I'm having? Like, how would I have gotten in the world? I'm thankful for water. I'm thankful for, the ability to drink clean water or to shower in clean water. And like, there's some places in the world that don't have that, and I'm so grateful that I have that. That's amazing. I feel so grateful for that. God, I feel so good just thinking about it. Just thinking about gratitude and all the things I'm grateful for and why, and generating that why and that whole physical experience. Wow, the energy just whoosh. And if I come into the world from that place, and I think of all the things I'm grateful for, and I start to focus on all the things that are good in my life, well, guess what? More good is going to show up. It's just how it works. There's a whole science behind this. I'm not just talking good deeds because something that came to me when I jumped into a cold lake one day. There's a whole practice behind this. And you get to start today. You know that it's an ongoing practice. It's something that you decide, not just once, but in every moment. How can I show up with love in this moment? For me, I want to see the day where we create a collective consciousness of this kindness, a collective consciousness of gratitude, a collective consciousness of love. When we come from that space as a workplace, as a family, in relationship, in our community, in our country, in our world, what does that look like? Because that's what I want to see. That's where I want to raise my children, in that space. And how I choose to do that is my choice. How I choose to do that is mine. How you choose to do that is yours, is your choice. And you know how. You'll know intuitively how you can shift a little bit. Decide. I might just start with practicing acts of gratitude at work. I might just start with writing little post-it notes to people and letting them know I appreciate them. I might just start with creating a ritual at my dinner table where we all talk about the things that we're grateful for. I might just start with waking up in the morning and thinking about all the things I'm grateful for and starting my day in that space. I might just start with choosing love, choosing to show up from a place of love, which equals patience, compassion, gratitude. And remember that the choice is not just once, it's again and again and again. Because you will be challenged. There will be button pushers. And you know what? There's not a lot of people that have had this kind of conversation, have been exposed to this kind of idea. So have compassion for those people. And know that they've had experiences in their life that have created great pain and hurt. And they're coming from that space, just as you and I have at one point. But now we can decide to shift that as an individual. And eventually, we can share that in our relationships and the people around us. And eventually, they will share it with the people around them, and around them, and around them. And eventually, we can shift the collective consciousness. So I thank you for being open to have this conversation in the workplace. Thank you so much for having me here to share some of the stories and to share the Good Deeds Project. The Good Deeds Project goal is to capture 7 billion good deeds, so I kind of need a little bit of help, and I would appreciate if you could check out the website, www.gooddeedsmovement.com, There's a way to type in your name and receive a Good Deed Challenge. And you can do that challenge or one of your own and let us know so we can count it as one of the 7 billion. And there's a whole, you could film it or take a picture and post it on Instagram or YouTube if you like, and hashtag Good Deeds Project, and it will automatically go on the website feed. So you can also check that on the website and see all the different good deeds that have been happening over time. Or you could be an undercover good deeder and just maybe decide today that you're going to practice one good deed a day or something like this, and enjoy the power of giving is really the beauty in receiving. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you will join me in creating a space where we can see what it looks like when we consciously choose love and consciously choose kindness. And maybe one day together we'll see something we call world peace. Imagine that.